Hey everyone, if you're joining me today, I know you're a focused learner. You're someone who really values getting straight to the absolute core of complex ideas. Well, today, we're dissecting a fascinating concept that completely flips our understanding of productivity on its head. Have you ever wondered why some people seem literally capable of studying for the bar exam or doing deep, complex coding work for 12 hours a day without crashing, while the rest of us feel absolutely fried after just 3 or 4? Most of us just assume, they have superhuman endurance or this crazy superior willpower. But our source material for today's explainer reveals that we've actually been looking at this entirely the wrong way. Burnout, it turns out, is not a failure of stamina. It is a failure of design.
Okay, let's dive into this. The number 12. When we hear the phrase 12-hour study day, it sounds incredibly intimidating, doesn't it? It sounds like a straight path to misery, exhaustion, and just complete mental collapse. We picture locking ourselves in a room, staring blankly at a textbook, gritting our teeth, and forcing our brains to absorb information through sheer, agonizing willpower, probably fueled entirely by panic and way too much caffeine. But we're going to dismantle that idea entirely today. The problem actually isn't the 12 hours themselves. The problem is how we typically experience and interpret those hours.
So here's the massive paradigm shift we really need to understand. Most people think studying for 12 hours a day is all about pushing your limits. It isn't. It's actually about removing friction. Think about it like driving a car with the emergency brake pulled up. Pushing your limits is like slamming your foot harder and harder on the gas pedal. Sure, you might move forward a bit, but you're going to absolutely destroy the engine in the process. Removing friction is simply releasing that emergency brake. The people who can study all day, they aren't pushing harder. They've just systematically removed the invisible friction that their brains are constantly fighting against.
To understand exactly how to release that brake, here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The 12-hour study myth. 2. The true cause of burnout. 3. 3 sources of friction. 4. Designing a frictionless system. And 5. The secret to consistency. And just walking through this structured agenda together right now actually helps reduce your own cognitive load, because you know exactly what to expect.
All right, moving right along to section 2, the true cause of burnout. And spoiler alert, it's not exhaustion.
The definition of burnout is actually fascinating. It is the brain's anticipation of exhaustion. Let that sink in. It doesn't start when you're physically tired. It starts much, much earlier, when your brain begins to predict that exhaustion is coming. And that prediction, it changes everything. If your brain looks at the upcoming study hours and reads them as uncertain, endless, and mentally expensive, it's going to fight you. Your focus will drop before the work even gets hard, and resistance shows up before you even open a single book. This happens because your brain doesn't actually measure time the way a clock does on the wall. It measures strain per unit of time. This is a super vital distinction. 12 hours of low-friction, clearly defined work can actually feel significantly easier and lighter to your brain than 4 hours of chaotic, unstructured, cognitively expensive effort. So it's not about your raw capacity at all. It's all about load management. The people studying 12 hours aren't carrying a heavier load. They've just packed their backpack perfectly so it doesn't strain their shoulders.
Which brings us to section 3, 3 sources of friction. The hidden cognitive drain.
So we have to ask, where is this heavy, chaotic load actually coming from? Well, according to our source material, it comes from 3 specific hidden enemies: decision-making, context switching, and emotional resistance. And honestly, if you don't actively control these 3 elements, absolutely no schedule, no fancy app, and no amount of espresso will save you. These are the silent killers of your study endurance.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what's happening inside your head. Before you even learn a single new fact, massive chunks of your mental bandwidth are just eaten up. Decision-making takes a slice, context switching takes a slice, emotional resistance takes a massive slice. And what are you left with? Just this tiny little sliver of bandwidth for actual learning. No wonder you feel exhausted after 2 hours. Your brain has basically been running a marathon of background processing. Let's break these down one by one. First up is decision-making. Every single time you pause and ask yourself, what should I study next? Should I take a break now? Wait, am I doing enough today? You are actively spending cognitive energy, but you aren't spending it on learning. You're spending it on managing the process. And that cost compounds quietly and relentlessly. Advanced studying means removing decisions before the day even starts. You don't sit down and think, you sit down and execute. A pre-decided plan protects your mental bandwidth. Number 2 is context switching. Your brain pays a steep penalty every time you shift focus to a new subject, a new format, or a new type of thinking. Every single time you jump from a complex math problem to checking a group chat, your brain pays the toll. The really dangerous part about this penalty is that it isn't immediate. It shows up later. It manifests as slower thinking, lower retention, and this heavy fatigue that you feel like you haven't even earned yet. High-level studying minimizes these switches. It favors longer blocks and deeper immersion, simply because constant switching is just incredibly expensive for your brain.
Third is emotional resistance, specifically what our source calls micro-resistance. Now, this is the layer most people never even see. If a task feels unclear or too difficult, your brain doesn't just quietly slow down, it actively pushes back. It's not loud. It looks like mindlessly checking your phone, staring at a textbook, but somehow ending up on social media, rereading the exact same line of text 3 times, or just losing focus every few minutes. We love to label this as laziness. But actually, scratch that, it is not laziness, it's friction. It happens because tasks aren't broken down into simple, executable steps.
Let's move on to Section 4, Designing a Frictionless System. Let's rebuild the day.
Now that we know our 3 enemies, decision fatigue, context switching, and emotional resistance, how do we actually rebuild our day to eliminate them? How do we design an environment where 12 hours of work actually feels manageable? Well, a real 12-hour system doesn't look intense. In fact, it looks incredibly controlled. It relies on 3 mechanical steps. Step 1, pre-decide the plan. You wake up with 0 decisions to make. You already know exactly what you'll study, in what order, and for how long. Step 2, create boundaries. Each block has a definitive beginning and end, so your brain doesn't panic at the sight of an endless day. It just sees manageable segments. Step 3, truly disengage. Between those bounded segments, you absolutely must recover properly.
And that brings us to a really critical distinction: clean breaks versus partial rest. During your breaks, you cannot just scroll on your phone or sit at your desk half working. Partial rest does not reset your brain. It merely delays fatigue. And delayed fatigue always returns stronger. Your breaks must be clean, intentional, and absolutely non-negotiable. It's about true disengagement. It's like letting a car engine cool completely before starting the next leg of a road trip.
And finally, Section 5, the secret to consistency, the counterintuitive climax.
This is the counterintuitive climax of our source material, and it's the one step that almost everyone gets totally wrong when they try to put in long, productive days. It is the ultimate secret to doing this day after day without burning out. You never finish empty. Just let that sink in for a second. Most ambitious people study or work until they are completely, absolutely drained. They view that exhaustion as a badge of honor, proof that they worked really hard. But doing this creates a massive problem. When you drain the tank completely, your brain encodes that entire day as too much. It remembers the pain. And so, the next morning, it heavily resists starting again.
So, the crucial point is this: you must stop slightly early. You don't stop early because you're weak, you stop early because you are actively training your brain. By leaving a small reserve of energy and creating a clean, controlled ending to your day, you completely change your brain's prediction for tomorrow. Your brain isn't waking up asking, can we endure another agonizing 12 hours? It's asking a much simpler question. It asks, was yesterday safe enough to repeat? If the answer is yes, because you removed friction, set boundaries, and finished with energy left in the tank, the resistance just drops. That is how long hours become consistent, not through sheer brutal force, but through intelligent design. Don't try to become someone who can force themselves to study 12 hours. Build a system where 12 hours simply doesn't feel like something your brain needs to escape from. Because when there's nothing to escape, there's nothing to resist. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Look at your own daily structure right now. Is your system safe enough to repeat tomorrow? Think about it and start removing that friction.